Find how much material there is in Jewish sources on dreams. I wasn't conscious of it fully until I began the study. So what I wanted to do is share a little bit with you tonight, first about how dreams are approached in the Talmud and the Zohar, and then after that to do a little personal go-around in terms of how each of you relates to the dream world. And then we have different handouts. We have handouts on the sources, and then we have the material I use in my dream workshops elsewhere, which is much more focused on helping people to remember their dreams and to work with their dreams and to engage with other people around the dreams. So a lot of you have probably seen this quotation. It's from both the Talmud and the Zohar, and it says, "A dream that is not interpreted is like a letter that is not read. And come and see, if one does not remember it, it is as if one had never known it. Therefore, whoever forgets a dream and does not know it will not benefit from its fulfillment." This is a really strong statement because in my dream workshops, what I find is that many people tell me they don't dream, which of course is not true. We dream at least 3 or 4 times a night, and this has been pretty well established in the various dream laboratories. One of the best dream laboratories is here at Stanford University. And Philippe Laberger, who's written a marvelous book about lucid dreaming, where you dream but you know that you're dreaming, has been studying people for many years. And at the Maimonides Hospital in New York City, there's been ongoing sleep research. And essentially, they can tell by recording the REM movements in the brain, the eye movements, that people are dreaming. But when people say they don't dream, what they really mean is they don't remember. And then if we inquire more, we find out that they have trouble remembering. Sometimes they recall the dreams that occur in the morning. But it's interesting that the Talmud should place so much emphasis on remembering. Now, why would that be? Almost all ancient people, including the Jews, believed that the dreams were messages from God, that the dreams contained divine guidance and direction and very often information that we needed either about our lives or the life of the country. And so most of the places in the world where the ancient Jews lived, where, like our father Abraham, came from Ur of the Chaldees, and in Ur and in Sumerian culture before that, the king always had a dream interpreter, just as the king always had an astrologer. This was true, of course, in Egypt as well. And the Akkadian people, the Canaanite people, and the other people in what have been ancient Israel, many of them had special gods that they appealed to, special deities for dreams, and they had rituals that they did to ask for dreams and so on. So the core for, I think, all of the Abrahamic religions is really in this notion, and it was shared by Native Americans in this country and later by the Greeks and the Romans, was that when we dream, we are in touch with the divine presence. And of course, in that process, there may be good dreams and bad dreams. There may be illuminated dreams, and there may be very harsh dreams. But the attitude was always that there's something in the dream. Now, in the Torah, we can't tell the difference very often with Abraham, whether it's a dream or a vision or prophecy. It'll often say that a dark cloud comes and he falls into a deep sleep and then he understands certain things. With other personalities in the Old Testament, it's clear when it's a dream. For example, when Jacob is out on the journey and he stops and he has the dream of the ladder, the Sulam, Jacob's ladder, where he sees the angels going up and coming down. And the other place in the Torah, of course, is Joseph in Egypt, where he interprets the dream of the Pharaoh, and in so doing, he is elevated to a high status in the government. And that same kind of story takes place with the prophet Daniel, who becomes the advisor to King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, based on his capacity to interpret dreams. So what you've got in the ancient world is kings who are relying on dream interpreters to guide a country and make decisions about peace and war. I don't know whether it was much worse than what our president has been doing, but it was an unusual way of making decisions. And what's implicit there is that the dreams of kings were obviously very highly valued, because the king was considered like a divine emissary, and the other group whose dreams were valued was those of the prophets. The Jewish view has always been that the prophet who prayed and fasted and meditated and cleared their life of a lot of extraneous material was in the best position to have the illuminated dream. That's a consistent view in all the material, that if you really want to have high-level dreams, you have to clear the way. You have to, often they would isolate themselves, they would fast, and of course they would pray. Very often they did water immersion as part of this, or some other form of cleansing, and Native American shamans would do probably sage and rattling and so on. They would get ready for the dream state, because they were operating on the notion that the dream state is a real experience. It's not just an escape, but it is something that is important. So here from the Zohar is a version of that. It says, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when men lie asleep and their souls cleave them, it is then written in slumber upon the bed that God opens the ears of men. And then the Holy One informs the soul through the particular level that is in charge of dreams, which in Judaism and Islam is the angel Gabriel, of things that are going to happen in the world, or of things with which the dreamer is preoccupied, so that men can receive correction in the world. If you have a bad dream, the assumption is that you are being challenged to somehow modify your life and make it more ethical. A person is not given information while enjoying bodily vigor during waking hours, as we have said, but the angel Gabriel informs the soul informs the person, and the dream is there in the world above when the souls leave their bodies and ascend, each in their own way. The Zohar states that the soul leaves the body at night and it travels up to the throne of glory, where it plays with God and the angels. And so very classical Jewish prayer, a hymn, as we say, to God be Yadchav ki ruchi, I place my spirit in your hands, V'eti shan v'oira, whether I sleep or I'm awake. And when we get up in the morning, the first prayer is thanking God for returning the soul to us. And implicit in this is the idea that it's kind of like when you see a Tibetan tanka and there are all these tough guys with swords, there's this idea that when the soul travels, there are dangers. There are guardians of different portals who want to keep it from getting to the information or test it to see if it's ready. There are many levels in the mystery of dreams. They are all a part of wisdom. Dream is one level, vision is one, and prophecy is one, and they are all levels, one above the other. So the idea is that the prophetic vision or the prophetic dream is like the highest level. And the prophet, or in Jewish times the high priest, is kind of like the dreamer for the whole country. The Jewish high priest had the breastplate where he would ask about the health of each tribe, and based on how it lit up, he would interpret it. So this person took on a great deal of importance. When the Babylonians invaded Israel in about 626 before the Common Era, and the Jews then went into exile to what would now be Iran and Iraq, what transpired, even though they were in exile, they lost their land, they went to a culture that wasn't that different than the one they had left behind. And so during that period, they studied astrology with the people who would later become Iranians, Iraqis, or Persians, or Medians. And they also shared dream technology. So the Talmud makes it clear, I think, that dreams are the universal language, because it says that the Jews went to Babylonian interpreters and the Babylonians came to Jewish interpreters. So this kind of interfaith exchange. And the Talmud tells us that at that time of the redaction of the Talmud, which would be about 600 in the Common Era, that there were 24 paid dream interpreters in the city of Jerusalem. Just pretty astonishing. And that they were, you were expected to compensate them, and that they were professionals. Now, sometimes they were scholars and rabbis and writers, but they were also perhaps people who were not necessarily ordained, but specially trained. And then the Talmud goes into detail about the idea of how you handle the dream. They are conscious right from the beginning that everyone has trivia in their dreams. They quote King Solomon as saying that there's always trivia. And so the Talmud says, as there is no grain without chaff, so there is no dream without vain things. And they also understand the role of the dreamer. And they say a person is shown in a dream only what is suggested in their own thoughts. Very modern idea, almost Freudian or Jungian. And they have the sense that the dreamer themselves may be the best interpreter of the dream. They recommend that you always share the dream, you always articulate the dream, but you never tell the dream to people unless you totally trust them. This is based on Joseph in the Torah telling his brothers who hated them, and so the dream takes 20 years to come about. So they're very specific about how to go about it, that you should deal with it quickly, you should share it, you should speak it. They don't talk about writing it, which we do in the modern era, and that the dream has to always be seen in the context of the person who's the dreamer. And if you read Gail Delaney or any of the other modern dream mavens, they all say, you are the producer, the director, the actor in the dream. And that we cannot use the symbol books, and we can't be tied to the notion that the dream only means one thing, that it is very much connected to who you are and what your personal experiences are. And the other thing, of course, that the Talmud teaches is that if the dream is negative, they have two interpretations. One is that that can come from the demonic level, that you've had an encounter with what we call the Sitra Achra, the other side. But for the most part, they say that a negative dream is sent to correct you. It's sent to give you information that will challenge you so that you change in some fashion or you seek help. And the other thing that goes back to the Talmud is a process by which you can ameliorate a dream. If you have a really horrific dream, there is a ritual in which you call together 3 trustworthy friends. You tell them the dream, and you do this 7 times, and I've given you a modified version of it if you want to try it. And you tell the dream, and the other people say, it's a good dream, it's a good dream, God is going to turn it over, it's all going to be for the good. But basically you go through this litany where you articulate and they respond, and it's like you're turning it, literally turning it from the negative to the positive. So that's where Jewish dream interpretation starts. It starts before the Common Era, and when they go back to Israel, and not all of them went back, a lot of them stayed in what we call Babylon, it's not clear how that thread continued. What we know is that after the second exile to Rome, the Jews started taking the attitude of distrusting people who were intuitive or people who had visions. They had this attitude that the second time the temple was destroyed, that all prophecy ended. And so the whole prophetic thing was looked upon with great mistrust. And the second time they were exiled, they went into Christian countries. And I would say by the 3rd or 4th century, Christianity had already adopted a view of some questioning of whether you could deal with dreams without entering the demonic. So it wasn't quite as friendly, although of course people kept dreaming and talking about dreams. And when we read the literature of the 10th, 11th, 12th century Jewish philosophers, we find that people went to their rabbis and their teachers with their dreams and asked for interpretations and really believed that they were getting premonitory information and guidance in the dreams. So the theme gets really picked up. I have one quote here from Maimonides, who lived in the 11th century in Egypt. He was Moroccan originally. And he says, "Tell me what your dreams are, and I will tell you not only what you are, but what you are to become." He was a doctor and a bit of a rationalist, but definitely he has a whole tractate on dreams, which has now been translated. And it continues into the medieval era. And with the emergence of the Zohar, the Book of Brilliance, on which we base all the Kabbalah, there is again a huge surge of interest in dreams. Just as there is an opening to the Shekhinah, the Divine Feminine, the development of the whole notion of the tree of life, and a submerging of a great deal of energy into mysticism with the publication of the Zohar at the end of the 13th century. Well, first it emerged, later it was written down. There's a tremendous emphasis on dreams. So there are whole sections in the Zohar about dreams. And one of my favorites says, "The dream is a mirror in which the pure soul sees the light that illuminates its life. And the seer who has a pure soul constantly sees everything without mixture and without doubt." So they continue that same notion that if you are already on a spiritual path, you'll have the better dreams. And they continue other ideas. They say a person should remember a good dream so that it will be fulfilled. And they say all dreams follow their interpretation, that if you remember your dream and you have it interpreted, there is a better chance of enacting the material that's in it. So I would take this as really the impetus really for people sharing dreams and being in dream groups. And what we know from the Jewish mystics is they prayed together, they meditated together, they did probably time travel together, and I imagine that they did share dreams. And this is reflected later with the spot mystics in the 16th century. There is now a book of dreams that was written by Rabbi Chaim Vital of his dreams that's been translated. So clearly there were always people keeping track. But the Zohar really reawakens this notion that every night the soul is traveling, and every night you can get information. They talk about special birds being associated with you, and that the birds go up to heaven and come back down. And they place a lot of emphasis on righteous thought and righteous action as being the prelude to the really high-level dream. And it continued, as I said, into the 16th century, where the Kabbalists pick up techniques that we might think of being more like the Greek dream induction temples. The temples of Asclepios, where people go and they fast and they pray and they wear beautiful white clothes, and there are priests who help them to seek a dream. The whole setting is set up for dream induction. So in the 16th century, the Jewish mystics are also talking about framing dream questions and going into a meditative state where you call the angel Gabriel, and we'll do this later tonight, and you ask for a dream. And some of them became very skillful, and you have later rabbis writing about this, where they frame a question, sometimes it's a question in Jewish law, and then they put it to the Sar HaChalamot, the angel in charge of dreams, and get back an answer in their dreams that night. they begin to work with it by being connected with the angels and the archangels, and they probably shared and wrote a lot more than we even know, but we certainly have some of it. And what we have from the 16th century is a scholar named Al-Moli. He was Turkish, and he wrote a book by the same title as Jung's book, as Freud's book, which is The Interpretation of Dreams. It's called in Hebrew Pitron HaChalamot. And he went into great detail. He had all of the symbols that, like these dream dictionaries that you would see now. He developed a whole dream dictionary. But what he did was he took all this material and he condensed it into a book that was not just for scholars, but for the public as well. And he had some interesting ideas, and I'll read you one of them, which I thought was a bit unusual. He says, the best means of differentiating the true from the untrue dream is by the degree of excitement experienced by the dreamer. If one dreams of powerful fantasy images that cause him to be excited or to feel anger or fear during the dream itself, this is a true dream. But if the images are insipid and arouse no strong feelings, the dream is not true. An amazing statement. The reliability of any dream is thus in proportion to its level of excitement. Now, I don't know whether modern dream interpreters would use the term true dream and untrue dream. They would say every dream is valid. But what they would say is that when you do have vivid technicolor dreams that are powerful and that enable you to remember them, they probably have more impact, more emotion connected with them. Al-Moli's book has been translated by a man named Joel Coven, and it contains a great deal of this information that was gleaned from earlier generations, but it also adds his own layers. And I think his main layer was that dream work is important, that dream work is sacred, that everybody engages in it, that we don't pay enough attention to it. And right now, if you picked up any of the modern dream books, they will all say the same thing. That this has really been very much of a 20th and 21st century message, that we are somehow missing the boat in terms of working on our inner life by being so busy or being so focused elsewhere that we don't remember dreams. We also know right now that barbiturates and sleeping pills and alcohol all work against remembering dreams. There are some people who will tell you they have more outlandish dreams when they're on drugs. But in general, the drugs and heavy food at night, those things pretty clearly are going to work against the kind of dreams you would be looking for. So Al-Moli added another layer, and then yet another layer that came later was the Hasidim, the great Jewish mystics. All of the great teachers from the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid of Mezrachan, I believe they were probably mostly lucid dreamers, but all of them were also engaged in helping their devotees by understanding their dreams and acknowledging the dreams and helping to work with them. And they too, they wrote a little bit about the dream world, not that much. And I think part of what happened in Judaism was the focus was more and more on the collective dream. The two collective dreams in Judaism are the return to Zion and the coming of the Messiah. And last week was Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Day, and somebody from Boulder called to tell me a story that was really amazing of a woman who had spoken at the Holocaust gathering in Boulder, where all the congregations get together. And she said that when she was in the camps, there would be constant rumors that someone had seen the Messiah,